feel like I have to tone it down now. Mike scared me. I was like, oh, jeez. I'm new here at Sky Fellowship, fairly new, and the family here, they've treated me so well, treated me like one of their own. It was very easy for me to get integrated. I think part of it is because we're all very similar in that we're all very weird. And so I like that, I appreciate that. And so I really want to just say, first of all, thank you, Sky Fellowship, for letting me speak, even though I'm pretty fairly new here. Tonight's message, even though it sounds like it, it's not only about church leaders. And it's not just about church people. It's about everybody and anybody. It's about your work, your business, your school life, all of those places. I want to just point out to you one little section, as long as I can find it, in the book of Ezekiel, that comes right before this. This is chapter 34, but chapter 33, right before this passage, it says something like this. I'll just read it to you. Son of man, your people will walk together about you. And he goes on, he says, they're going to say, come and hear with the word of the Lord, the word that comes from the Lord. And they're going to come to you as people come, and they're going to sit before you as my people. And they hear what you say, but they will not do it. For with lustful talk in their mouths they act, their heart is set on gain. And behold, you are to them like one who sings lustful songs with a beautiful voice and plays well on an instrument. You guys are already following my voice is very beautiful, isn't it? For they hear what you say, but they will not do it. When this comes, and it will come, they will know that a prophet has been among them. And then he goes on to say what he says. I don't know about you, but when I hear this spoken to me. And the reason why I chose this passage, when I felt really led to choose this, is because as I was searching the scriptures, I felt like, what really encapsulates what God has been speaking to my life in the last few years? Every day, in all the different communities that I've been a part of, the different jobs that I've had, the different bosses that I've had, and coworkers, the different churches that I've been to, what's the one thing that I really feel has been burning in my heart? And it's this word. He says something interesting, and I have to tell you this before I go on. He says with lustful talk in their mouths they act. He doesn't mean like they're being lusty. He's saying they want to satisfy some kind of like feeling or craving that they have. And the second thing is their hearts, they're set on gain. And he said the word gain is basically the word for profit. They want profit. They want to come and sit before you, Ezekiel, right? This is God talking to Ezekiel. They want to sit before you and they just want something. But they're not going to do what you say. They're going to want to feel good for a few minutes, and then they're going to go on their way. They're going to forget everything you said, and they're just going to be like, I just got inoculated. I feel good now, you can go home. But Ezekiel speaks, and he speaks a harsh word, and he does it against the shepherds of Israel. There's two kinds of people that we're looking at here. The one person is the shepherd leader, and the second person is the person in community, just the person who's in the community. And the first thing I want to bring out to you before we talk about those two people again is profit-drivenness. You know, profit-drivenness. What I've seen a lot of as I've been in communities and jobs is this valuing of agenda and business and profit over human beings, over people, over souls, over personalities, over people who have feelings, who have thoughts, who have a history, who have lives, right? And the greatest example of this was when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was with my cousin, and I remember my cousin was a drug addict. He was on cocaine, he was addicted, he's my beloved cousin. And I remember he changed his entire life, and I saw it with my own eyes. He was a very scary guy, 6'4", big football player guy. And he radically transformed his life for Jesus. He went out, he started bringing kids in from the street. He was bringing kids in. He's like, he'd drive by. Hey, dude, you want to get in the car? Let's go play basketball, right? And it's just like, what? This is like huge guy in the car. And he's calling me into the car. But they would come in. He'd buy them lunch. He'd play basketball with them. He'd take them to the movies. They'd go to diners and talk. And he would share his faith with them. And as he was doing that, he'd say, I really want you to come to church with me because that's where I really found salvation. That's where I found salvation for myself. I was able to quit cocaine. I was able to live this new life. And suddenly, I remember this when I was a kid. This was in California. He'd bring all these kids over, and they were getting changed. They were like actually coming to know the Lord. And then the pastor and the people there, they told him that you can't bring these kids here anymore. The congregation, they're uncomfortable with it. And he was like, well, I don't get it. Hold on a second. Let me get this right. This is a church. We preach these things. We preach these really good messages about like love and like helping people. And I'm in an opportunity to do that. What he means is, like, no, the congregation, basically, they feel uncomfortable with all these hoodlums. And you can't bring them anymore. And he said, forget it. My cousin said, forget it. And I wish I was old enough, like, to talk to him and be like, yo, just stick it out. Let's do something different. But he fell so far because he put so much of his hope into this church community. And when they rejected him, because of what he was doing, actually trying to help people, he fell. Eventually, he became a multimillionaire. He took his father's company. He was such a charismatic and interesting dude. He turned it into a multi-million-dollar company, but he had unlimited money. Because of that, what happened? He went back to drugs. He went back into cocaine. I remember waiting outside of crack houses in Hollywood with my uncle, aunt and uncle, waiting for him to come out so we could ambush him and bring him back home to his wife and kids. I was back in New York, and I got a call from my Uncle Jerry. And my Uncle Jerry said, Jimmy, your cousin Larry's dead. I said, what happened? He said, he had an overdose. I'll send you a plane ticket. You're going to come to the funeral. And I don't know, there's so much to that story, but the one thing that I really took away from this is, he was trying to do something. But the community of religious people, they just wanted to keep things in their way, in their order, and they were unable to allow the sheep to grow and to be active and move and love. And I think part of that is happening here in Israel. Part of something like that is happening. We've become, in our churches and even in our businesses, a place where we think of return on investment. How many of you guys, in your relationships, I bet you're counting the dollars in your head. No, I bet not even just dollars. You're counting the return on investment. Now, what am I going to get from this person? Oh man, I've spent an hour with him already, right? At the end of the day, I don't know if this person's worth an hour. That's demonic, man. That's not godly. That doesn't come from God. That comes from consumerism. That comes from the business world bleeding into the church, and that shouldn't be that way. Christians we're always supposed to be different. Why do we put a price on people's souls and their time? Like, why do we think of return on investment when we think of spending time with people? Did Jesus think of a return on investment? No, he lost everything. He lost his whole investment so that we could live. There's more. The two kinds of people. The profit-driven leader in the community. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's about fame or respect or personal fulfillment. And a lot of us, and I've seen this, I've done this too, end up abusing people to further our own agendas. And that's why we have so much burnout in churches. You guys notice that? We burn people out because we start forgetting what it's really about. And it's not about a bigger building. It's not about, better programs or whatever. It's about human beings. It's about human beings and their relationship to the loving God who sent us out. He said, you're going to be my light. You're going to be my love. But then somehow we're not doing that. And so I just want to say right now, to those of you who've been outside of the church, and you're here for just temporarily these next 20 or 30 minutes, I just want to say on behalf of everybody else, sorry. I'm really sorry. Because it was never meant to be that way. We were never meant to prize tradition or institution or regulations or rituals over you. We were never meant to think return on investment when it came to spending time with you or thinking about you. We are sorry. This is not Christ's fault. This is our fault. I hope you would accept that apology. It's not just pastors, though, right? Like guys like me. It's deacons, it's elders, it's praise leaders, it's coordinators, and it's also business owners. If you're a Christian, you're a business owner. Or you have people under you. And God, here he says in verse 2, at the end of it, he says, shepherds of Israel. You know what that is? That's basically, have you ever heard this from your sibling? Or have you ever done this? Right? That's God. You shepherds of Israel, man, you don't get it. And all through history, you're saying, oh man, don't you know how much I love them? And I sent you to care for them. And what you do instead of loving them, you just want to eat them. You want to devour them. You want to get every juice out. You want to suck them out so you can get famous, or you can have your own things, or have your own agenda get pushed in. He says, man, there's going to come a day when you're not going to be able to do that. And I'm going to judge you. I'm going to judge you harder than I ever judged anybody else. If you're a leader, this word is for you. It's for me. God's anger. Can you imagine? Imagine you had a kid and you hired a nanny. All right? And that nanny, you had like one of those cameras in the teddy bear eye, right? Or the belly button of a doll. And you were like at work and you're like, all right, I want to see how good this nanny is. And the nanny starts abusing your kid. What was going on in your heart? You'd be like, I hired you, I gave you money, and I trusted you with my kid, and you treat them like that. I'm not going to let that go. If I was that dad, I'd drive home right then and there, and something would happen. I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen. You fill in the blank, right? It shows how merciful God is. That even when we do this, God is love, right? He is love. Love isn't God. God is love. But true love is also just. True love is also just. If you were all love, you'd just be sentimentality. Ugh. Right? Like everything goes. Oh my gosh, right? But if you were all justice, you'd be draconian. You'd be too strict. But true love is both loving and just. He's loving because he's just, and he's just because he's loving. This is who God is, and this is how he responds to that. And he says here, in a few verses down, he says, there's these 4 things that I want you to do, but you haven't been doing. He says, strengthening the weak, healing the sick, binding the injured, bringing back the strayed. I'm guilty of that. There's so many people in my mind who just slipped out and haven't gone after them as a friend. And it's not about going after you because I want to fill in the attendance. It's because I really, really care about you. I want you to know what I know and feel what I feel and experience what I do. The primary agenda of a leader is not money or fame or any of these things or profit. It's people. I've seen this in families when parents want to live through their children so much, they put too much burden on them. They want to live like forever through them instead of letting them serve God and live in light of the Holy Spirit and what He does. I've seen this in businesses where employees are abused. You know the Sabbath wasn't just instituted because God was like, oh, the Sabbath's awesome. It's the 7th day. Don't you love the number 7? The Sabbath was instituted so that business owners like us, rich people like us, would give people a break. That's why it was instituted. So that we wouldn't drive people too hard. He says Sabbath is for people. churches I've seen to fuel the machine, 10% do 90% of the work. You guys at your church like that? And he says, the Bible says, because of that, the sheep are scattered. They're scattered. And that leads me to my second point. The well-fed sheep. There's a second type of person. He says, I will judge between sheep and sheep, between skinny sheep and fat sheep. And some of you guys, right, he's saying, some of you guys are actually like, you're looking out for your own good. You're not looking out for the people next to you. And you're also about profit. It's not just the leaders, it's you guys too. You care about your own well-being. Like, I want to be really well-fed. Well, all these other guys, whatever with them, I just need to get what I need to get. Where in the Bible does it say that that's how we should be? Where in the Bible does it say that if I don't get fed, I'm going to go get it, but I'm not going to give it. I'm not going to give it to these guys. And I'm going to say it like this. They're probably out there trying to get food because the shepherds aren't feeding. Okay, I get that. But at the same time, Ezekiel's still saying, but still, why aren't you sharing? Why aren't you helping each other? Did you guys ever hear that story? I love this story. It's a little parable about heaven and hell. You know, a guy dies, and Jesus takes him to door number 1, and he says, this is hell, right? And there's a big pot of soup in the middle, and there's people right next, like circling it. And they have these spoons, these wooden spoons, and they're just too long, so they can't eat. They're like attached to the end of the hand, and they can't eat the soup. And they're like, I'm struggling, right? And he opens the next door, and he says, this is heaven. And he says, it's the same situation, except people are feeding each other. They have these long spoons that they can't put in their own mouths. So they say, hey, why don't I feed you, and then you feed me, and then we just share. I think that's what community is supposed to be. I think that's what Christian community is supposed to be. I think even with coworkers, if you have coworkers, you're probably really annoying or whatever, and your bosses are abusive, you should be caring for each other. Being Christian is not all about being fed. That's part of it. But it's mostly about feeding others. Haven't you heard Jesus say, it's better to give than to receive? You know, I go to Princeton Seminary, and when I'm in seminary, I'm reading all these great theological works, and I'm like, oh man, I'm getting so fed. But you know what? I start getting depressed. After a while, it's like, I can have enough. I'm too fat right now. Right? I'm just eating too much. And this last weekend, this is my 6th sermon this weekend. I just came back from youth retreat, and when I do that, I get filled up with life. So I'm giving. On our way back, me and my friends were so pumped. We saw this homeless person. We got out of the car, and we just started like talking, preaching the gospel. Like, hey, you want my jacket? You want this? You want that? And it's just like, whoa. And I'm like, wait, you're not just spending on drugs, right? And we're just talking. And, you know, I got that person's number. And try to contact them again. We're so pumped, and after that, I just felt so good. And I'm glad that I'm coming in here like that, rather than like, all right, I just have like, all this reading and stuff, and you know, I feel good. I feel fed. It's weird. Christian community, and not just Christian community, but community. Any community is about these principles. That's what it's about. Where in the Bible does it say that thou shalt eat at all costs? Where does it say that? Where does it talk about thou shalt get more blessing at any cost? No, it says feed each other, give to each other. And Jesus gives us a warning. And I think it's a loving warning. I think it's a warning because he loves people so much. He's saying this, when I come back, it's going to be separate like this. And I'm going to separate the goats and the sheep, or the sheep and the goats. I don't like. And I'm going to judge between you. I'm going to say, when I was sick, you didn't take care of me, to the goats. He's saying, and when I was cold, you didn't give me clothes. When I was hungry, you didn't give me food. And they're going to be like, when the heck did we see that, Jesus? I was just hanging out with like Joe Schmo over here. And he says, the fact that you didn't do it to that person is the same thing as you not doing it to me. And he's going to say to the other people, right? The people who he's like, don't you want to be the people when Jesus sees you, when he comes in his effulgence and power and glory? Don't you want to be the person that he comes to and says, man, my good servant, right? You're good. You actually read this and did it. Don't you want to be that guy? with that girl and that woman. And you're going to be like, but Jesus, well, when did I do that? And he says, remember that time you did this for that person? When we heard Jessica and Sharon's story, little things like that. It's always the little things, right? I'm so glad you did that. He's not going to say, oh, I'm so glad you made $1 million. Right? That's really noteworthy. No. That's not what this is about. And if you think that that's what this is about, you gotta keep coming to church. Okay? I just want to close with this. I don't want to go too long here. There's a weird intrusion in verse 23. And it says, I will set up over them one shepherd. And this is weird, because why is he talking about King David all of a sudden? He says, my servant David shall feed them. He shall feed them and be their shepherd, and I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David shall... David's dead, right? What are you talking about? David's been dead for hundreds of years now. And God is... I really believe here that God is pointing to a person. And that person was named the Son of David. He was a descendant of King David. His name was Jesus Christ. And when Jesus Christ came, he said in multiple occasions, I am the good shepherd. I'm the one you've been waiting for. I'm here. And I'm going to set you free. And all these shepherds and these leaders who haven't been feeding you, man, I'm going to feed you bread that's going to keep coming. It's going to keep coming through the Spirit. I'm going to give you water that's going to overflow. You'll never be thirsty again. I'm going to live in your heart so that no matter where you are, no matter how difficult it gets, you're going to be okay. You're going to have joy. That person was Jesus Christ. It was the prophecy of Ezekiel, and it came true in him. And when Jesus came in Matthew 9, he said, he felt anguish. He says, my people Israel, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And then you know what he says? He says to his disciples, pray to the Lord so that he would send out people to take care of my sheep. Guys, do you realize that you being in here, you're being sent? You're not just being called to hear a good message and sing some good songs. You're being sent. You're being the people sent out to the sheep. And in John 10, he gives this crazy saying, like this crazy word. He says, and I love this. How many of you guys haven't watched Frozen? The movie called, I don't want to ruin it. All right. I was going to use it. It's too early for an illustration from Frozen. Maybe in 5 years. All right. But there's anyway. Jesus Christ, he says this. I'm the good shepherd. I lay down my life for my sheep. He didn't just come and feed us. He actually gave himself for us. And so much so that he says that I'm such a good shepherd that even when nobody wants to go and search for that one sheep that's gone, I'll go. I'll go and find you, and I'll bring you back. That's how much he cares. There's a lot of us here. If one of us left, he would care about you. Do you realize that? That's what the scripture says. That's the promise. He cares about you. He longs for your heart. He wants to have a relationship with you. And you wouldn't have died if it was just because we could start a new religion. You think Jesus Christ would die so we could start a new religion? He died so that he could reconcile you with the Father who loves you. And if that's not where you're at, or what you're longing for, you gotta learn the gospel. Would you do that? Would you be able to allow Jesus not just to be your gift? Martin Luther says he's both your gift and your model, for example. What that means is this. He's a gift in that he's your good shepherd, but he's also your model, in that you are to become like the good shepherd. Would you be like that? Or will you be as Ezekiel says? Ezekiel says, they're not going to listen to you. What is it going to be? Sheep and goats. And this doesn't, I don't want to put any more burdens on you. It's not a burden to care for people. If you think it's a burden to care for people, come talk to me. I just want to close with that. As I want to invite yourself, we're going to extend an invitation to you. I think every time we hear the word of God, we have to respond. And if that's where God's leading you, you must respond. We must respond together. And here are the questions that I want to ask you. And if you feel like, yeah, that's what I want to do, then I'm going to ask you to come up. There are these different stations here. One station over there, to my left and to your right, is where you can write down a prayer to God. And you can put some tape on it and then pin it to this cross back here behind me. To my right and to your left, there's a prayer mural. However you want to express you're like, this is how I want to respond, you can choose either one. That one you can write on the board. Just write a prayer. You can draw something. Or just a phrase. Anything. And the third and last thing is this. I'm going to be up here in one of these corners, along with a few other people who want to pray with you. And we actually want to just listen to you. And hear out what you desire prayer for, what you need help with. So you can come to us as well. And here are the questions that I want to ask. For leaders and community members, will you lay down your rights, your ruling, your profit-driven mind, and your selfishness? Will you take up the cause of others, becoming a person of grace, who's generous with all? And will you see the person before you see the agenda? If that's you, I'd like to invite you up. Even at this time, I'd like to invite you up. You can come through the middle, or you can come through the outsides. The other question I want to ask is to all of us. Christ wants to make a disciple of you. If you want to become a disciple of Jesus Christ, I also want to invite you up to that. And the last is this. Those of you who don't know Jesus, maybe you've stayed away from the church for a long time. Maybe you have your doubts. I want to pray with you guys. I want us to pray with you. And so if that's you, then come up. Come up to pray with us or write something, write a prayer. It doesn't have to be that personal, but it's up to you. So we're going to open up the floor now. I'm going to invite you. Please come. Stand up out of your seats. Those of you who are moved, the Holy Spirit's moving your heart, please come up. And those who are going to pray for them,